Hey, how are you? Randal Small is a Better Life Coach. This is Behind the Book. The book we're talking about is Descendants, continuing a legacy of faith and hope by none other than Pastor Sonny Arguinzoni Jr. Pastor Sonny, this has been enjoyable. We've done a few segments so far. We've gotten into what Descendants is about and the pioneering, and then into the Joshua generation. And then there's, of course, the Descendants. We'll get to that in a minute. But I want to talk a little bit more about the gang in the generation of Joshua's that you brought to life this aspect of the ministry, which is the youth ministry, God's anointed now generation. There were so many things that happened during that time that were different than your normal youth ministry, than, it was like babysitting service for, if the parents were in service and then the kids got stuck in a room and they watched a movie and then had pizza and that was it.
Right.
You guys did different things. What were some of the different things in the Joshua generation of?
Well, one of the things about now generation that God could save you now, 12 years old, 13, 15, whatever age you are, God could save you now. Number two, God could call you now to the ministry. And God could use you now. Because every one of us have giftings. We have our own passions, our personal style, and our spiritual gifts.
See, I feel like that's so important. That aspect to tie in to people. We're not just talking about the book, but it is about the book. That's why you wrote the book. But for the inspiration for exactly that purpose,
Yes.
that the now of who you are now, not always looking to what's next. What are you now? Like, get busy.
Yes.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Do what you're meant to do.
Yeah, and no one's too young and no one's too old.
Right.
God could use you now.
Yeah.
And so that's what God put in my heart, because I didn't think much of myself. I just thought, I'm a baseball player. I don't even like to go to school, but I do it because I want to play baseball. I didn't like to read. I didn't like to study when I was a teenager. But then when God calls you by name, all of a sudden he inspires you to equip yourself for your calling.
Right.
Because you're called to do something big. And that's what God spoke to me about. And it started out real small. And it was very complex. I felt ordinary when it comes to preaching. But then I started believing that God could use young people now.
Yeah.
And so we started developing their gifts. Some of them became actors, some of them became athletes, some of them became singers, other types of people. And so we started developing drama ministry. So we weren't having pizza parties and, just get-togethers and fellowships or swimming pool things, which we did all that, but that wasn't the main focus.
Right.
We were focused on a mission to reach our generation.
Right.
And so we got ideas, and we did a drama called Straight from the Hood, packed out the place every time we had it. And we started traveling with that play, did stadiums. We did another one called Cry of the Young. And that one was a multimedia presentation. The first time I've ever seen it, drama plus media on the screens.
Right.
In between you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
You were there. And that hit the partiers, the people that are, clubbers,
Right.
people like that. And so we're hitting all these different veins. We found our niche for our generation to pack out stadiums, to pack out our church.
Right.
With lines around the building. It even got to the point where a future actress, she was just barely starting out, Jessica Alba.
Oh, yeah.
Came to one of our events, and she started liking our church.
Yeah.
And so different people, even the Christian community started coming, people from mega churches, that their youth ministry was not too good.
Right.
Their sons and daughters would visit our church because, man, we want to do that here.
Right.
I got called by Christianity Today magazine. They said, "Do you believe in church dancing and clubs?" I said, "No, we present the gospel through those forums, but we don't believe in that."
Right.
Because that's going to draw people into the club. And those that have been in the club, they're going to say, "This is whack."
Yeah.
So
trying to pull them out.
Trying to pull them out and give them a mission.
Yeah.
And give them a vision for their personal life and for the ministry that they're in.
Yeah. What about that can someone who's 17 seeing this now and go, well, what do I have to offer? I don't know, I'm not really good at what he's doing, or I don't know that I could do that. Like, what could someone take away from stories in the book, or like what you're talking about?
Yeah. Well, I could say this, that I could fast forward a little bit to my own children. Okay, my son Cruz, that you see in that picture right there, when he was a baby, like not baby, 4 years old, the same man that prophesied over my dad and prophesied over you at one point and
Yes.
me, he prophesied over my son in the green room after we had him at our church, Dick Mills.
Dick Mills.
And he says, "Who is this young man?" To my wife. "That's my son. That's our firstborn. That's Cruz." He says, "I have a word for him." And so his wife would always take the notes, right,
yeah.
and write down the scriptures.
Betty.
Yeah. So he says, "Write this down." And he says, "This young man is going to be wise beyond his years, and he also has music in him." This young man, I never imposed music upon him. I imposed baseball upon him.
Right.
And it didn't
Let's
work.
just be honest. Let's just tell it like it is. I mean, this is behind the book. He doesn't. He imposed baseball on him. You heard it here.
Him and my son Jordan, I put him in Little League and all that.
Yeah.
But Cruz, he quite didn't have the
Yeah.
gift.
Didn't quite take to
No.
that.
Yeah, and then he says, "Maybe I need glasses," and we got him glasses.
Yeah.
It wasn't glasses. It was just a skill set.
Yeah.
But then in elementary school, I think it was in 5th grade, they opened it up for music. And so he came home with the paper. Can I join the music? And then it triggered Kim. She remembered the prophecy. We never told him about it because we forgot about it pretty much until he said it. Then he started playing, I think, the trumpet to begin with. And then he moved on to the saxophone in junior high.
Right.
Then I buy him a saxophone, and he never uses it. He moved on to the bass, stand-up bass and jazz.
I remember that. You're talking about how much that saxophone cost. Like, the guy's not playing it.
But he found his niche,
Right.
his gift,
Right.
at an early age.
Yeah.
And at the age of 15, he made a commitment to serve the Lord.
Yeah.
He came home from retreat, and I said, "What did God speak to you about?" He was 11 years old at that time, before this 15-year-old. And at PK retreat, he goes, "I'm called." He gave one-word answers. I go, "For what?"
Yeah, he didn't talk a whole lot then.
11 years old.
Yeah.
He goes, "Music." And I go, "Music for what?"
Right.
"Church." "Okay, for what church?" He goes, "Our church."
Yeah.
And then little by little, it started developing. But he was so gifted in it.
Yeah.
Today, he is now our MD for our gang, God's Anointed Now Generation.
Yeah.
He's also one of the young adult leaders. Not only is he gifted in that, but he's a preacher. He loves the word. And what I prayed for before I started this ministry, even before I had kids or had a wife, that my children won't have to go the route I went.
Yes.
That they have a sense of identity as
Very
they're
good.
growing up in the church. They have a place
Yeah.
they can call home, and a sense of belonging, a sense of destiny.
Yeah.
And so that's what we instilled. Once he was born, all my children, Kim really helped with that. So instilled that in him.
Yeah.
And so we had a place called the gang where they felt a part. They didn't have to go to the world.
Right.
They didn't have to experience the world like I did.
Right.
Or my sisters, because at that time our youth ministry was whack.
Right. Yeah.
So now today it's evolved.
Yeah. So from the pioneer, then into the Joshua generation, then the beginnings of the gang ministry, establishing something that looked like such a hard road, because like we said, it didn't just pop up and it was successful from day one. It was a lot of pushing through, and I say that for a reason, because talking about visions and seeing like the mentioning of Dick Mills prophesying and saying these things are going to happen, a lot of times we don't know the full ramifications of what we're meant to do. We just feel called into a direction. We feel in a direction, and you go in the direction. You started heading in the direction with the gang. Your son started moving towards music. You start going, and then the next steps present themselves along the way. It's not always like, okay, here's the 66-point plan for the rest of your life. It's like, no, here's the next step. Okay, so take the next step. And that's what this progression that is talked about in this book of, okay, there was a pioneering part, and then there was establishing and so forth. Okay, so then now here's the next wave, which was the Joshua generation and development of the gang, and then it went on from there into Descendants. But there were so many things that came out of the gang, the different places that you found yourself. I mean, I don't want to tell the story for you, but I mean, at one point it had something to do with the highest office in the land.
Yeah,
You found yourself there.
That's true. What happened is that I would always preach that, God, we're going to make history together, guys. We may be seemingly unlikely candidates, but God chooses unlikely people to do extraordinary things.
Mm-hmm.
And I would preach, some of you are going to be a businessman, some of you are athletes, some of you are going to be, all these different prophecies I would give. And then I said, and we're going to make history someday. So in the year 2000, we get a letter from the president of the United States, George W. Bush, or their office. They sent a letter to our office. At that time, my dad was the senior pastor. So in the letter, they stated they want the gang leader to come to a special session to meet the president, and we're going to be signing a faith-based initiative. Because they would give money, the government would give money to other organizations that were secular, but George W. Bush, he ran on that as a piece of his plan.
Right.
And so immediately he moved on it. So they contacted 30 clergy, and we were one of them. And so I remember my dad getting me in the room at my house, and he says, they want you. And I go, no, Dad, you're the main guy.
Right.
They want you. He goes, no, look at it. It says gang.
Right.
But I was, at that time I was super shy still. I was still finding my footing and confidence. I was kind of sometimes an insecure leader.
Yeah.
And so he says, this is what I want you to do. You're going to go, you're going to take my books, Treasures Out of Darkness, and the book Sonny, his testimony. And I want you to hand it to him directly and then tell him who we are. Okay? So when I get there, I'm like, I'm nervous, dude. I'm like,
no doubt.
yeah. And then I get into the room with 30
I mean, no big deal. It's just an afternoon in the White House. I mean, come on,
So
it's just a normal Thursday.
So we had to go through all the security, too.
Sure.
This is before 9/11.
Right.
And so I get in the room, and they're all older people. They're all 55 and up,
Some pioneers
I was
were
only,
in the room.
exactly. Yeah. And I'm 30 years old at the time.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I look around the room, I thought, my dad's supposed to be here.
Right. No doubt.
They chose the wrong guy.
Yeah.
I mean, he put me out there. I was sitting by Chuck Olson, right? Is that his name?
Colson.
Colson,
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Chuck Colson.
He was a prison ministry
Right.
pioneer. He's passed on with the Lord now. But I'm sitting there, and then there's one guy next to me here, and then the president comes in. So I'm right there thinking, man, I'm out of place. They had like one Muslim, one Hindu. They had to mix it up.
Sure.
One Buddhist, but then most of them evangelicals. So George Bush, he began to share his testimony, how he got saved. He was an alcoholic. He was a coke addict, saved through the Methodist movement. Anyway, so he comes to a close, and we're getting ready to go to the press room. And I get up in line. I get up there, and I shook his hand, and I had my books. And I told him who we are. I said, my dad's the founder of Victory Outreach International, blah, 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 blah. In 30 seconds, I gave him a quick,
Sure.
description.
Yeah.
And my name's Sonny Jr. And he's shaking my hand. But the great thing about him, though, he didn't look away the whole time. Like, give me your hand. Just the whole time, he's like shaking it.
Yeah.
Didn't look away. Didn't get distracted.
Right.
I appreciated that.
Yeah. No kidding.
He didn't. There was other people around.
He's actually engaged with you. Yeah.
And then he says, I know who you are. That's why you're here.
I know who you are. That's why you're here. I know who you are. That's why you're
Out of
here.
people all over the United States, he recognized us. We were called into that room. History making.
History making. I know
And
who
there's
you
still
are.
a picture of me. You can look it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen that.
And I had to go like this, like, dude, what do they call that guy, Waldo?
Yeah.
Because they were to make
Dude,
sure I get
where's
the
Waldo in the shot?
Make sure 'cause
Hey.
he put a guy in front of me with a turban.
Sure.
And I go, I gotta get in the shot. So when he's signing the documents, I got the picture.
Yeah.
Part of history.
Way to make it happen. One more in this session. There was something else about history making that the gang and this movement as a whole, the generations and the descendants.
Yeah, there's a big fat book, like a textbook, that they were teaching in Fuller Seminary. And one of our Dr. Del
Castro.
Castro, sorry. Yeah, so he was going to school at the time there, and he came up with, they found a book. It was a brand new book. It was called the Pentecostal and Charismatic History, something like that. And he was reading through it, and he found, as it goes chronological, from the book of Acts all the way up to the present time of the time. And he got to the point of 1967. And it gave my story about my dad and my mom, about Victory Outreach. And then it had a second piece to it about
In the history book.
in the history book.
Wow.
Yeah, of the gang. And most of those ministries, it had a start and an end. With us, it had a hyphen, continued.
Yeah.
So we're continuing even now
Right.
with the legacy
Yes.
of faith and hope. Powerful, huh? History
Amazing.
making.
It is.
I remember we had a meeting after, and I said, guys, we made it.
Yeah.
History.
That's it.
Remember we talked about
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
History making.
Literally going down in history.
Yes.
That's how it happens. Descendants. I know who you are. That's why you're here.
Good word.
This book will help you know who you are and why you're here.
Good.
You can get a hold of it at sonnyarguinzonijr.com, vocinfo.org, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I know who you are and why you're here. You and everybody else on the planet wants to know who you are and why you're here. I promise you, the stories, the conversations, the interactions, the QR codes with the videos that you can look up, all of that is going to help you know who you are and why you're here. Descendants has more than just, oh, those are nice stories. It has something for you
Yes.
to be able to take away and apply to your own life to change not only your life, but also your descendants. Get a hold of your copy very, very soon. Like today. We'll see you next time.